Welcome to Interview from Mexico. I'm Laura Carlson, and I'll be your host as we look at the cutting-edge issues that are shaping Mexico today, from art to politics, here on Telesur. We're here on this hill outside the small farming village of San Salvador Atenco. This peaceful community has become a symbol of popular resistance in Mexico ever since the government threatened to expropriate these lands to build a giant airport project. Today, that threat still exists. Although the airport wasn't built, there's still a possibility that these lands could be privatized soon. To talk about the experience of Atenco, we're very happy to have with us Trinidad Ramirez and Ignacio del Valle, two people who have been at the forefront of the movement in defense of land. Welcome to Interview from Mexico. Let's start at the beginning. I wanted to ask you, what did you think and how did the community respond when they first heard about these plans to turn these lands into a giant airport?
Well, we're talking about 2001. In early 2001, a rumor went around that there was going to be an airport, that they were going to install an airport in the lands of Texcoco. There wasn't a lot of concern. There was some confusion, but we said they're going to do it in a place that doesn't correspond to Atenco, and that was Texcoco, which we belong to, but we're different, independent municipalities. Atenco is the municipality seat, and Texcoco is another municipality.
At this time, then, how did people respond when they knew that it was going to be on their lands?
Well, yes. At first, the first months of April, May of the year 2001, the people didn't get too concerned because they thought it was in another place, far from their territory. The concern really begins when the rumor starts that makes us think it's the territory of our community. That's when concern begins and people begin to get really upset. And so they talked to us about progress and public use, and that put us in a difficult situation because as Mexicans, we're respectful and we really do want progress for our country. But when they didn't tell us about it, of course, because nobody never bothered to come to talk to us, to tell us about it, about this project, and that worried us. Why don't they talk to us about this project? Who is making this decision? The government? Or forces behind the government? What's happening? Who is interested in this airport? When for decades we've had huge social needs. So there's this concern and this big question. What will happen to our lands if they decide to build this airport in our territory? There's a concern that's very, very large. But when the information that more than 80% of our territory will be occupied by the project in the area for the airport is confirmed, and we find out that this 80% is more than 5,000 hectares of the communities in Atenco, well, there's great concern because 80% is the majority of our lands that they wanted to take over with this project.
Trini, I wanted to ask you, what do people want to conserve here? Why was there a reaction against converting these lands into an airport?
Well, something we have always said is that we don't want our way of life to change. We live in a community where there are customs, traditions, We have an identity.
Here
Here we've lived all our childhoods, and of course what we want to conserve is our land, from our grandparents. It's the land we inherited from our ancestors.
antepasados, ya que
Back in 2001, some people who wanted the project said we have to hand over the land, that the land has only been lent to us by the government. But we've said all along that the government didn't just lend us this land.
y nosotros hemos sostenido y afirmado
This land our ancestors won with their blood.
esta tierra la ganaron nuestros abuelos con sangre.
Well, I know that this is probably a difficult question, but can you talk to us a little about the confrontation that took place in May of 2006?
Bien, pero yo creo que antes tiene que ver con lo que tenemos que comentar.
Yes, but I think it's important to explain something first. That at the beginning, our people decided not to leave the lands, not because they're stubborn, but because of the meaning of existing in this place. Here, we have our history. We aren't people who just came to settle here a few years ago. We're millennial peoples. We are the original peoples. We have a way of being, an identity that is tied directly to the earth, to this universe that surrounds us and that we feel very proud of.
Que nos rodea y del cual nos sentimos altamente orgullosos. Y que
And so, to accept this project without even being asked, I think it is the most vile way of imposing an attitude of imposition, a perverse attitude on the part of those who represent us, that are the governments, from the municipality to the state to the federal government.
desde el municipal, el estatal hasta el federal, los tres niveles.
All three levels of government conspired to place this project on a silver tray for the large companies and corporations, not even national but international ones, for this airport.
No, ni siquiera nacionales, sino internacionales para este proyecto de aeropuerto.
Let's come right back to that point after a pause. We'll be right back. We're back with Ignacio del Valle and Trinidad Ramirez talking about Atenco. We were talking about the bloody events of May 2006. What happened at that time?
Era un 2 de mayo.
It was on May 2nd when there was an agreement with the municipal government of Texcoco to give permission to some street vendors who sell flowers.
Ambulantes, floristas que son de la gente de la montaña.
They are people from the mountains.
Muy pobre.
They're very poor people who traditionally sell flowers and produce from the countryside,
Productos que producen en el campo, como son nopalitos, como son verdolagas, quelites, miel.
such as like cactus, vegetables, herbs, and honey.
Justo el día 3 de mayo.
And on these holidays, such as May 3rd or May 10th and May 15th, these are market days when they can sell what they produce, and they wanted to sell flowers. But due to the remodeling of the center of Texcoco, they wanted to kick them out and not let them sell, so they arrived at this agreement. But the other day, the day afterwards, the authorities didn't fulfill their agreement.
No los permitieron.
But the next day, the agreement was broken. They didn't let them put up their stalls to sell, and this had to do with the fact that they wanted to teach a lesson to us at the front, the Popular Front for the Defense of the Land. Because in 2001, 2002, through resistance, we managed to get them to withdraw the decree expropriating our lands. We felt this was a punishment and an example so that no one would raise their voice again. So this is the way we understood what happened May 3rd and 4th of 2006. It was a lesson to criminalize, to destroy what had become an example of resistance, not just in the region, but in the whole country.
Un referente de resistencia no solo en la región sino en el país, porque sí se pudo echar abajo el decreto expropiatorio.
And did they send police in, or what exactly happened then?
Sí, la fuerza pública es la que utiliza el
Yes, the security forces are what the government, the system, uses, in this case the municipal government. But not only did they send in the local police, they sent in the state police and the army and agents of the federal police.
La PFP.
Now, Trini, I wanted to ask you, of course, the Popular Front for the Defense of Land is the name of the organization that was formed in Atenco around this conflict regarding the mega project of the airport. What's the role of women been in that, and has their experience been different in this process of organization and resistance?
Bueno, nosotros nos conformamos en el 2001 como un...
We organized in 2001 as a group of villages to defend the land, because it wasn't only the municipality of Atenco that would be expropriated, but many other municipalities. There was Chimalhuacán, and Texcoco, and Atenco. It was a lot of land.
Era una extensión muy grande. Y entonces nos conformamos así porque creímos...
So we organized like this because we thought that this represented all the villages, because there was and there's still the representation. So how did we move forward after we created the Front of Peoples in Defense of the Land? Just like it says, we got the communities together to make decisions on what to do, how to defend the land.
Nosotros como que tomar acuerdos de qué hacemos. ¿Sí? O cómo íbamos a defender la tierra.
There was a response of all the communities, a strong no to the sale of the lands. And from there on in, there wasn't any other idea at that time. We never considered it when they were offering to pay $120 a meter for the land. We said no. We made it clear that this no was not because we wanted them to pay us more, to raise the price. This was never the idea, never. It was simply that we believed that the land does not have a price.
Quisiéramos que nos aumentaran más, ¿no? Que nos pagaran más y entonces sí aceptábamos. Jamás fue esa la idea. Jamás.
For us, we've always considered it something sacred, as our mother who gives us everything. The land gives us everything. So how did women get involved? Without a doubt, the role of women has been very important to this struggle. When maybe, I don't know, maybe the government, who is the one who started the conflict? Because we also want to say that we did not start any conflict. It was the government that came to break up our way of life, to tear apart the social fabric of our community, of our communities. That's when we said, no, we don't accept your scheme. And that's when the women came out to join the fight.
Romper con el tejido social de nuestra comunidad, de nuestras comunidades, y es por eso que nosotros dijimos no y no aceptamos.
Saying, we don't want you to take our land away. Because I think, above all, we always think about the children. What will happen to our family? What will happen to our children? They were talking about relocation. They already had a place for us, for the people of Atenco, where they were going to relocate us because we weren't going to have land anymore.
Ya tenían un lugar para nosotros, ¿sí? Los de Atenco, a donde nos iban a reubicar, porque ya no ibas a tener tierra.
And not just the farmlands. They also were going to occupy the community itself, where we had our houses. If they had to put a highway through, well then, goodbye to that house that I think always every family had built with a lot of sacrifice. So the fight of the women was important because we had to confront a lot of problems.
Yo creo que cada una de las familias las hacemos con mucho sacrificio. Entonces, por eso es que importante la lucha de las mujeres porque
We had to have a lot of discussions with our husbands in which they said, "You stay here." No, I want to go because I want to fight for my children. No, you stay here because not everyone can go.
no, tú te quedas aquí porque pues no podemos ir todos, ¿no?
Well, I'm going to have to interrupt you there because we're going to take a short pause and we'll be right back here on Interview from Mexico. We're back talking about the resistance of the small farming village of Atenco to the government's plan to build an international airport on these lands. We were discussing the repression in May of 2006, and of course following that, many members of the community were taken to prison. And Ignacio, you were one of them. Could you describe for us your experience in prison?
Como experiencia, bueno, pues en el 2000.
As experience, well, in 2002, July 11th, we were also in prison, and it was a really hard experience because the security forces came in for one reason: to repress those who they believed to be a danger to them, a danger to the system, because we opposed these projects. In 2002, we were taken to prison, and luckily, the people organized and we were released, rescued by the people who went up against the system to liberate us.
La devolución, vamos, ese rescate que hace el pueblo en contra del sistema para liberarnos.
That was the first experience. Then in the second experience, on May 3rd, we were sent to prison again to teach us this lesson, that the government wanted to make an example of what should not be done. To protest in our country, in Mexico, is a crime. To protect and defend and raise your voice, to use your rights to defend yourself, is a crime. So in our Mexico, the prison is not to construct, but to destroy the human being. In particular, they go against those who have an ideology of freedom for their people.
Well, Trini, we know that this was a difficult period for you personally and also for the movement. Can you talk to us about what happened with the movement during that period when so many members were in prison?
Bueno, pues después de que empezamos a regresar al pueblo,
after we began to return to the village, struggle had already begun for the release of all the prisoners behind bars and all the members being pursued. Of course, there were a lot of organizations supporting the movement, on the side of the movement, and there was also the other campaign. This was the time of the other campaign, and we had the support of all of them. So as the members of the organization have been continuing the fight, I came back on November 25, 2006, and rejoined the struggle that the people had nobly kept up. I really recognized their efforts because they never allowed the front to fall apart the way the government wanted.
Reconocimiento porque no dejaron que el frente se diluyera como quería.
The government wanted to separate the movement, like Ignacio said, because we weren't in agreement with the imposition.
Estamos de acuerdo en permitir esas imposiciones, ¿no?
And then finally you were able to get those prisoners freed, weren't you?
Sí, se logró hacer una campaña nacional e internacional que.
Yes, we managed to build a national and international campaign that was joined by a lot of organizations, of all of our brothers and sisters from the states of Oaxaca, Chiapas, Guerrero, and all that states. Also writers, journalists, and intellectuals joined the campaign. the bishops Raúl Vera and Samuel Ruiz, may he rest in peace, and a lot of renowned people that made it possible to win the release of the prisoners. There was also an important legal strategy, but without a doubt, what really won the release of the prisoners was the pressure from the people.
Well, I want to fast forward now to today, because we can see that you managed to stop the airport in those times, but we hear that there's a new threat to these lands and a new effort to break up the ownership of the ejido, of your community, of these lands that we're standing on right now.
Sí, la amenaza siempre ha estado latente.
Yes, the threat has always been there. The governments have used the institutions, in this case the Agrarian Office and the National Agrarian Registry, which are the institutions in Mexico that have to do with land titles. Land in Mexico has a collective ownership system, the ejido, that has to do with community and collective values. That's what they want to destroy. They want to change the system of the ejido to a private ownership regime. And so that's why we have to fight back, and that's why our resistance still goes on. We don't want money. We want them to leave us in peace. This is the fundamental reason, because our history is buried here. Our identity, our love for life. We struggle for life.
You've been struggling, you've been fighting against this project and for defense of the land for over a decade now. How do you evaluate the experience so far?
La experiencia que hemos adquirido de esto, pues...
The experience we've gained from this is to reaffirm our conscience. It reaffirms our position to say that the land is not for sale. The country is not for sale. Latin America is not for sale. We say this, our Latin American brothers and sisters, our Venezuelan brothers and sisters who we've learned from in this struggle. I think this fight is of all Latin America, not just Mexico. And all the world where there are injustices, where people dare to say no to projects like this, no to imposing a project, no to them taking away your land, your natural resource, your education, your health and everything. We don't want this privatization. We don't want this neoliberal model for Latin America or for anywhere. That's why we're here.
Para nuestra América Latina, para ningún lado. Entonces, por eso es que aquí estamos.
Well, thank you so much, Ignacio del Valle, Trinidad Ramirez. Thank you for being on Interview from Mexico.
The land is not for sale.
It is to love and to defend.
The country is not for sale.
It is to love and to defend.
It is right to fight for life. The struggle continues. Zapato lives.
The struggle continues.
La lucha sigue.
Thank you again for being with us. And thank you. This is Laura Carlson for Interview from Mexico.
¿Cuánto negocio van a hacer?